How's it going, everybody? It's Mr. Joe here, pop culture, history, comics, and cartooning mentor and historian here in my bookshelf-filled studio. I just wanted to take the time to talk about a couple things that have been on my mind. I just had my weekly meeting with my writer, Sean Berry, and we were talking about the events in Charlottesville and the kind of state of the nation and the union. So I think what we both agreed is taking place, or should take place, is some kind of turning point. A couple things came to mind because in reference to pop culture, I want to bring up two things that I find personally abhorrent about the folks we saw gathering in Charlotte and the folks we've seen at these alt-right rallies, decorated with the American flags much in the way Captain America dresses. To most comics fans who are aware of the history of the character, and especially the creators of the character, that is a gross misreading of what that character represents. To see folks going into battle mode. We saw them here in Portland a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago at this point. I could actually turn around and since engaging with peaceful protesters who were here by the thousands in Portland, in spite of what the broadcast images of a literal handful of destructive non-participants. Those guys are, dressing up in public and essentially like LARPers, like these live-action role-playing folks with foam swords. They're going out with homemade shields, ready to go and defend in battle the way of life they believe they are engaged in. The other thing I want to bring up is at this Charlottesville rally, particularly in the Vice news piece that was done on Charlotte, you saw a guy who was interviewed and photographed repeatedly. He's the guy who's been weeping on the internet. He's been bawling his eyes out because he discovered there was a warrant put out for his arrest due to his hateful speech and threats of violence, and apparently his admission of engaging in violence in Charlotte and his advocacy for an ethno-state and all. Essentially just a lonely, young, middle-class white man, as I believe so many of these folks are, and he's wearing a Punisher t-shirt, which is another gross mischaracterization and misreading of what that character represents and what the creators of that character, the various writers and artists through the years, have wanted that character to represent, and who've read this character for so long know what he stands for, who he pals around with. He's an American veteran, just like Captain America. In fact, the Punisher character and Captain America have way more in common than a simple surface reading of either character would have you think. These guys are both PTSD American citizens who fought for their country, and now that they're home, they're waging their own war of self-righteousness. But they're not killing people wantonly because of their race. They fought in the service, and they know that they fought alongside people of all different races, as everybody who fights in the service does. This is what I see. I see a bizarre level of relatability. And I don't mean that in that I agree with anything that they stand for. I mean that I see a little bit of where these guys are coming from. I think when I look at that guy who was crying his eyes out because he was trying to emulate the Punisher, collecting all these guns, showing up thinking he was on a self-righteous mission to save the American people. If you don't read the text, if you just read graphic novels for the images, then you miss a lot about what these characters are actually about and actually intended to be about. So one thing we were talking about is the need in this country for mentorship. The turning point we're at is recognizing these guys are domestic terrorists. I think a lot of people are willing to admit that now. A lot of people in political leadership are willing to admit that, and a lot of American citizens who may or may not have voted for Trump are willing to say, yeah, they're terrorizing people for a purpose they may or may not know, but they're intentionally showing up armed to the teeth with weaponry and armor. They're just lonely, middle-class white men with nothing better to do. They discovered these groups on 4chan. They're probably LARPing at home. The guy who was featured on Vice, they found clips of him in 2014. He was on the Colbert Report in a feature about a small town, tongue-in-cheek, because it's the Colbert Report, it's the character Colbert, making fun of these hometown heroes who in New Hampshire, in a libertarian town, were putting change in parking meters that were about to go out. In their view, being Robin Hoods, being superheroes, battling the libertarian state because these guys believed that the government should not be collecting money from people, it should be involved in something else. These were the tiniest small towns surrounded in the lushest green forest area of New Hampshire you can possibly imagine. It's more Springfield than Springfield from The Simpsons. It's a beautiful town, and you know, in the Colbert Report piece, it's the same guy, Chris Cantwell, I think is his name, except 6 years ago, instead of being jacked and having lifted weights every spare moment he's had since, he's overweight and he is very meek, and he is called out for being the a-hole that he is by Colbert, because what they do is three of these guys and maybe a couple of their buddies, they were doing this Robin Hood gig, but then they were filming themselves on YouTube and producing voluminous videos of them following meter maids and harassing them and accusing them of everything from bombing brown babies in the Middle East, because one of the meter maids is a veteran, and they follow him and they accuse him of that, and he eventually quits his job because of the harassment. This is their achievement, getting that guy to feel guilty about serving in the military. And that guy, Chris Cantwell, was weeping on the internet yesterday, is 6 years ago, overweight, brandishing his gun, saying that he carries it with him everywhere. It's just a handgun, a pistol, and he's very knowledgeable. I'm for responsible gun use. This was very responsible gun use, because he's harassing meter maids and following them, calling them names, saying they're involved in evil acts and all this stuff, they're part of the evil empire. These are meter maids. These are people who, they're just trying to issue enough tickets literally so that they can have a bonus, so they can have one vacation in their work year. You know them, we don't like them, but I don't think they're the evil empire. They're the weakest, smallest target I could possibly imagine, and this was his target, and this is what he was doing. So he was featured on the Colbert Report. He and his friends were just YouTube dorks. He represents to me what this is all about. This is about lonely, bored, young men in America who have never experienced oppression in their lives, but need a target for their boredom. I think what we as both liberals and conservatives have to admit after this weekend is we have a domestic terror problem in this country, and it's no different from the terrorist problem that we have in Middle Eastern countries, which, as Sean's wife pointed out, many specialists in the military have pointed out the real source of terrorism abroad is bored, unemployed young men with nothing to do and nowhere to target their anger and boredom. So they're given targets and they're given a purpose, and that's what so many counter-terrorist efforts have worked to counteract through creating education programs, which to date have admittedly largely been aimed at young women abroad. They've identified this as the source of terrorism abroad. It's the source of terrorism in this country too. There's bored young white men out there, probably reading comic books, definitely playing online, massive multiplayer online role-playing games, the MMORGs. If in a society where we are not building purpose for our wayward young men, but instead parents are raising kids to simply feel good about themselves, or simply to be happy, as opposed to giving of themselves to their own community in the United States of America. We need mentorship. So the reason I'm making this video is because I have been engaged in mentorship for the past 3 years of some young boys and girls here in Portland. Just found myself doing it because, frankly, I needed something to do with my talents and my time, and I was given the opportunity to create some classes, and I did. And I've been expanding my my curriculum around things that I know and that I can take home to my studio and actually apply. You can see here there's one of my drafting tables featuring one product, and then my other drafting table where I'm doing my inking here in my studio. I'm blessed with the opportunity to do what I always wanted to do, but I'm giving back, and that's what's motivating me to do what I feel I've always been meant to do, which is create great art and create good art and tell great stories or good stories. That's up to you to determine. The reason I feel that pop culture and history go so hand in hand now, and what I tell all of my students is a young American kid or a young Western kid who's into anime is no different than Vincent van Gogh interested in Japanese prints, because that's where he got a lot of his inspiration. So yeah, basically this video is going on a little bit. Let this be the first video of many, because I, as Mr. Joe, the character design and concept art cartooning mentor, feel there is a connection between mentorship, creativity, and purpose in our American dialogue as we struggle with our own identity in our adolescence as a nation. So that being said, I'm going to cut this video off, and if you have any questions, put them in the comment section and we'll take it from there. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate the dialogue. Cheers.